Today we'll be exploring Vaisakhi, the most well-known and celebrated festival in the Sikh calendar. We all know the common narrative, but in this episode we'll go beyond that with the help of J.S. Gadawal's Master of the White Hawk and have our questions answered by Dr. Guru Gobind Singh. Together we'll explore 10 key questions that have often been overlooked, including the role of the Masands, eyewitness account, is 1699 really the correct year, and much more. So join us today as we take a journey down the rabbit hole of written sources regarding Vaisakhi, and don't forget to watch this until the end to make sure that you find out the truth and also catch a sneak peek of the next podcast episode.
Well, if you look at the Sikh Panth, or this kind of I wouldn't even like to use the word Sikh Panth. Let's look at it in a different way. Let's look at the original followers of Guru Nanak. And so when you had this original Sangat, I think probably the word to use is Sangat at that stage.
Yeah.
So you had the Sangat of the Guru. And as the Sangat of the Guru flourished and spread throughout India, obviously there was a need for some kind of hierarchy or some kind of system to manage that Sangat. And I think one part of that role would be, like we can say, teachers, or people who have some knowledge, or what we'd call a Giani nowadays.
Yeah.
And so these people, they're officials, they're given power by the Guru to be like diplomats for him in a certain extent, to go out on his behalf and represent him, and also to manage the lands and the wealth of the Jarava, of the offerings that the Sangat bring in, and to organize, obviously, spiritual events, Kirtan, Path, and etc., Gatha, Seva. And from what I understand of Sikh Ityas, and I can't give any specific examples, but from my reading of it, the early system of the Masands worked very well.
Yeah.
And it was when the Sangat was very small. So there was no real vested interest in being a Masand, because there was nothing really to gain.
There's no political power attached to it.
Oh, exactly. There's no political power, there's no money, there's no fame and glory. But then what happens as the Sikh Panth gets rooted in the Punjab, as time ticks on, as the Sikh Panth flourishes, there's more money, there's more charava, there's more to be gained. And then this original system, you can almost say it's like a priestly class to a certain extent. I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but it's kind of something like that. It kind of gets very corrupted. And the story that I heard, and again, I can't give quotations about the origin of it, but the story that I remember is the Sangat isn't the Sangat you have now, which is a one-way communication between a preacher and a Sangat. Yeah. So, you have the Giani gets onto the stage. He is the know-it-all, or the Sant, and everyone is subordinate. I mean, if you look in Bhai Gurdas Vara, it talks about the Sangat asking questions to the preacher and taking notes. Yeah. So it was a two-way interaction, just like a classroom.
Yep.
That was the original Sangat before it became the Sikh religion and Christianized. And so in this interaction between Guru Gobind Singh and the Sangat would sometimes do plays, and they would do theatrical plays to represent something that was going on. And one of their plays was about the Masands and how corrupt they were. And the Guru, he understood the message of what the Sangat was saying to him, that this system is really corrupt. They're taking charawa, paise, and this is why, this quotation you give about the particular Masand, that's why Guru Gobind Singh investigated it and found him to be guilty of these crimes. And then to go further into the Sikh Ityas, if you go to Anandpur Sahib and you do darshan, take out a few days because you're in Punjab to understand your own history. And the fact is, our history is rooted in the spiritual tradition. It's intimately connected in our spiritual tradition. It's not like we don't live in a secular world in Punjab. The spiritual, the dharam and the social are the same thing. Yep. So if you want to understand your ityas, you have to go to the spiritual places. And I don't want to call them religious places anymore. For me, they're spiritual places.
Yeah, right.
They're places for meditation and worship and prayer. They've got nothing to do with religion. Religion has been imposed on them.
Yeah.
And so if you go to Anandpur Sahib and you look at the ityas, you got Takht Keshkar Sahib, you got Manji Sahib Gurdwara, and in Manji Sahib, which is also known as Damalgarh, the Takht of Guru Gobind Singh was actually his royal darbar. Guru Granth Sahib was not Prakash there.
Okay.
Right? So he would hold his court there. The Prakash was at Manji Sahib Gurdwara, which is opposite.
Yeah.
And that's where the first Nahang Damalla was ever tried by Baba Fateh Singh. And that's another story altogether.
Yeah.
It's all the Malleda, yeah?
Okay. And that's all the Malleda is referring directly to that Gurdwara and is connected directly to the story you just said. Okay.
And that, if you look in ancient Sikh Hathalikt manuscripts, you'll find that particular composition named as the Malla Nama Bashai Dasami.
Okay.
Somehow it's lost its heading over time.
And it's now referred to as Slok the Malla. Okay.
And so you'll find that in handwritten manuscripts as well. And so in and around Anandpur Sahib, the different Gurdwara, after you go behind Manji Sahib Gurdwara, there's Seesganj Gurdwara, where the head of Guru Tegh Bahadur was cremated by Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj.
Okay.
Where Bhai Jeta Ji brought the head from Delhi of Guru Tegh Bahadur to Guru Gobind Singh.
Okay.
Most Punjabis in the West would have not gone to that Gurdwara. They don't even know about it.
It's the first time I've heard about it.
Right, it's there.
Yeah.
And then if you go down the road a little bit further, there's also the Damdama Sahib, which has also been renamed. And that was where Guru Gobind Singh actually started the project of creating a standardized Guru Granth Sahib or writing Guru Granth Sahib. So that was happening there. And also in the same area is where Guru Gobind Singh held his court, because you've got to remember things are written. So you're going to have people who write documents in one area. So the people writing documents were there. And then just down the road was Fatehgarh Sahib, where Guru Gobind Singh trained his army for 6 years. So these are all the Gurdwara in and around that vicinity. And that's also one fortress area. Then you've got Lohgarh Sahib down the other way. You've got Anandgarh Sahib, Shahidi Bagh, and Taragarh Sahib even further out. So you have to explore this vicinity of Anandpur Sahib to understand the Sikh history itself. And the Masand were brought to not the Guru's royal court, but to his actual court. And his court was near the house of Guru Tegh Bahadur, by the way, yeah?
Okay, and what would the difference be in the court that they came to?
Because you have a court that, like, you have one court where you receive Sangat and visitors and officials, and then one court, which is a court of justice. So the court of justice of Guru Gobind Singh was in this area. And the Masands, after Guru Gobind Singh saw this play, they were called there and they were tried. You know how you have a trial? They were tried, and a lot of Sangat aren't going to like this, but they were punished by being soaked in oil, set on fire, and thrown while they were burning into a well. And that well is still there, which is called Masandani Kuh. And so you've got to understand what Guru Gobind Singh at that time, why he had to do this and why that justice, because I've often pondered it, because I think Guru Gobind Singh and all the gurus were so merciful. Why would he do this? Like, why would Maharaj do this? Like, somebody who's so merciful, somebody who sacrificed so much for the Panth, why would he make an example and punish the Masands? I can't say so severely because I trust what he did and I trust that that's what they needed. I want to link it back into the original question and where I interrupted you.
Yeah, sure, sorry.
Because you're talking about the Khalsa and the Masands. And then I want to try to explain why I think that happened from my reading of Sikh history, not to give any specific quotes, because if we start doing that, we'll be here for hours and hours, right?
Our quotes.
Yeah, exactly. I want to give my overview of after reading Surah Prakash and reading all the different Granths. So my understanding of it is this, is that we've already talked about the corruption of that system. We've already talked about that it's hierarchical, and it had to be hierarchical. Now, the Khalsa is a fraternity. It's not so hierarchical. So it's completely different. And in the power that the Guru vested in these officials, they did what you can say is the worst thing. They misappropriated the sectarum to fill their fat bellies. And that for the Guru was the worst crime. And that they were amassing wealth, they were fraudulent, and they were abusive, and they were doing other like bad behavior, right? With the Sangat. And so for the Guru, that his Sangat is abused to that level by these individuals. And so this is the Guru, he wasn't going to allow corruption in the Panth because he wanted the Panth to flower. And if these people were not punished, there would be no Khalsa. There would be, the Khalsa, from his birth, it would also be corrupt. Because those people would have come in, influenced, and done the same thing. We see the same happening in Buddhadal nowadays, the same Masand there.
Yep.
And so we have to look at this old system wasn't replaced by the Khalsa, because that's what Sikh history would say. That's what rationality would argue. You know how you're saying, you have to get rid of this to make this. No, it's something actually more subtle. By removing that, it allowed the Khalsa to form. It allowed the Khalsa to come, because there was no possibility of the Khalsa being allowed to flourish if this other thing existed.
It's almost making the soil fertile to then plant.
That's right. That's right. And it may allow, therefore, the Sikh Raj to come afterwards, right?
Yep.
Because then it was more of a military order. So you've got this priestly order. Remember, in the Dasam Granth, Guru Gobind Singh is scathing of Brahmanism and the priestly order. And the Masands had become somewhat Brahmanic. And if you even look at the issues that Guru had with Tirmal, Ram Rai and so forth, it's also very similar to the Masand issue, right?
Yeah.
And afterwards, what happens with Banda Singh Bahadur, yeah? So it's a very much the similar issue cropping up again, that people say, I am the Guru. Yeah. And acting like the Guru, and so on and so forth. We see the same now with Gurmeet Ram Rahim, yeah? And others. We see Radha Swami. And Namtaris and the same stuff. Yeah, no offense to anyone who is any of those. I'm not saying this.
But it's just a fact.
Just a fact, yeah. So in Sikh theology, that's always been a problem. So this was a problem. And the proof is, number one, that when Guru Gobind Singh creates the Khalsa, he feeds the Khalsa, the Kshatris, before the Brahmins. And this comes in the, after the...
Pisses someone off, doesn't it?
Yeah, Misraju, the Brahman, is mentioned in the Savaya, the Khalsa Memma, in Dasam Granth. And so the Guru feeds the Kshatris first. And Maharaj in the Teti Savaya, which was also, is said to have been recited by Guru Gobind Singh in the first Amrit Sanjar, the 32 or 33 Savaya of the Dasam Granth, however we see it, where the famous line, Jagat Jod Jaban is a pasar about the Khalsa. And it says, this is the Khalsa and this is the Na Khalsa. In that same longer composition, it mentions the Masands in a negative way. And so you also have the proof from Guru Gobind Singh's own Siri Mukhwak, from his holy oration, that he was against the Masand system. And so the Khalsa, like you said, directly replaces as a warrior military order the priestly class, which was the Masand system. So the Masand, in my opinion, I mean, I'm not against Brahmanism. I love the Veda. I love Sanskrit. I love the Indian yoga, Ayurveda. And we have to admit that Brahmins, to a certain extent, to a large extent, preserve this knowledge. They preserve this knowledge. We can't knock the knowledge we have. But what I don't like as a sect is the hierarchy of Brahmanism.
Yeah, and the caste.
So I respect the Brahman for his knowledge,
Yeah.
but I don't respect the hierarchy of Brahmanism. And then this same thing had crept into the Masands. And then you could see why on a warrior level, you would want to replace that and why they're punished, because they're misrepresenting the Guru. And they're also undermining his power. And that, from what Guru Gobind Singh had in his vision for his son, the Khalsa, his daughter, the Khalsa Panth, that would have corrupted us from the very beginning. And we've only flourished to what we have because he made that sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah?
There are two questions off the back of that, which I don't think there are necessarily answers to. It's just got my curiosity. But one is like why the removal of the Masand at that point, and not say perhaps when Guru Gobind Singh Ji decided to kind of take the Panth down the more military side. I don't think there is an answer to it because it's one of those what ifs. And then there was something else, but it's completely slipped my mind, so it doesn't matter.
So the first question we can go into, because the military side of the Panth in the Akalis of the Akal Takht had not been formalized.
Touche. It was too early to do this.
It was too early.
Yeah.
And then, Guru Gobind Singh, he's decided to leave Guru Granth Sahib and the Guru Panth as the Guru.
Yeah.
And if the Guru Panth is going to be the Guru, and it's a fraternity of the Khalsa, a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a sovereign nation, sovereign people, you cannot have a priestly class. And so in a way, imagine the Masands were good people, they were noble, they were saintly, this would have not happened to them. And that's why in our Panth,
it's like a kid, it had to happen. Like that was just a play.
It had to happen that way. Like nowadays, if you want to insult a Nahang, you call him a Masand.
Yeah.
Like
it's derogatory.
Baba Giani Singh, who was about 117 when he died. He was in jail with Mahatma Gandhi. Your dad met him at Holla Mahalla one year.
Oh, nice.
Like we just spoke about him, then we saw him on the road. And he was itinerant, moving place to place, and he knew Shastra Vidya. And he learned Shastra Vidya from Giani Singh Rab himself. And he was also had the same name, Giani Singh. And when he would talk about the SGPC, he would call them Masand, because they're filling their stomachs with the offerings of Dharma. So we see the Masands are around now. The Masands haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah. All right, just moving on then to the use of the term Khalsa. Now, in Ganda Singh's collection of Hukamnamas, and I've picked out, I think, 4 here. And it's just basically about the use of the term Khalsa and how it's being used. So, for argument's sake, there's a Hukamnama dated to the 12th of March, 1699. It's addressed to the Sangat of Machiwara, and it states, "The Sangat is my Khalsa, have no faith in the Masands." Yeah, so again, related to what we were discussing earlier. Another dated 1st of February 1700, the Sangat of Patan Farid is told, "You are my Khalsa." Again, you are not to have faith in any Masand. Another Hukamnama of Guru Gobind Singh Ji to Pai Kalyan Rai and the Sangat of Machiwara in 1698 is also again states, "The Sangat is my Khalsa." There's 2 more, one from the 25th of April 1699. Maharaj is saying here, Khalsa is distinguished from the Sangat Salang. So it's a term found in the Hukamnama of Guru Gobind Singh Ji again from 1699. Salang referring to a person who's initiated into Sikhi by a Masand on behalf of the Guru. So again, what we were discussing earlier on. And then there's a couple in 1706 and 1707, again referring to the Sangat as Khalsa. So further Hukamnamas 1706 and 1707, again, to the Sangat of Dol and Kara, refer again to the Sangat as my Khalsa. Again, I think it's pretty clear it's to distinguish from the Masands and their whole role within the community, because obviously it's referring to them having initiated Sikhs on behalf of the Guru. Now, is the term just being used as a way of differentiating, and does its significance then grow once 1699 happens?
From my knowledge, the term Khalsa was also used by Guru Tegh Bahadur in one Hukamnama, and I could be wrong.
You sound correct. I think I've heard something similar, yeah.
And then the term Khalsa occurs in a Shabad of Bhagat Kabir Ji, and some people say that in the Art Damdama Sabir, the Damdami Sarup, that the word Khulasa was changed by Guru Gobind Singh to Khalsa in that Shabad. And so Khulasa is the whirling of the Darvish, yeah? And it means somebody who is in that cosmic spin, which is endless.
Yeah.
So they're broken free nirvana, basically, yeah? That divine emptiness, they're in the cosmic ocean, yeah? They're becoming to complete emptiness. They've gone into void, shunya. nirvana. And that's like this cosmic spin. It's indescribable, but the Sufis do it through whirling, people do it through chanting. You know, people have their own ways of expressing it.
Yeah.
So that Khulasa, to be free, there's not much in it between that and Khalsa. And so the Khalsa, again, somebody who's Chakravarti, who roams the four directions, is Khulasa, is somebody swirling, moving around. The original Rehitnamas also says a Sikh should do Chakravarti to the four taks, yeah? Now, you know, the SGPC made the fifth because they're political and they wanted all the votes, so three would be theirs and leave two outside of Punjab, yeah? But, you know, that's just their mindset. But really, the Guru made four taks and the fifth one was the Khalsa. And the Khalsa would circumambulate between those 4 points, again, moving around, yeah? This idea of being free. So the Khalsa, again, means a sovereign, somebody who's free.
Yeah.
So it's a spiritual principle which translates into a physical reality for that group of people. And that's how Guru was using that term. So saying somebody who's not in this spiritual hierarchy. So for me, like, you know, Gianis or Sants, I'm really not interested. Yeah. Like, you know, Maharaj says, Sants samu anek matike, that comes in Saviya. Like, I'm saying, yeah, I respect Sants and I respect the truth they have. I respect their bhakti. I respect the naam they do for humanity. I respect their upakar for humanity, their compassion. But do I go and worship them or follow them? No. I can go and maybe get wisdom and advice from them, but now it's become a cultish nature in Sikhs, to follow this sant and that sant and this. And Tikya, Naam Jap Hunda is okay, but it's not a Khalsa.
No.
A Khalsa is somebody who's Kshatriya, somebody who's a warrior, somebody who's armed. And that's how Guru Gobind Singh left the Khalsa Panth. And so they're halfway there, right? Yeah. And so the thing is, Tikya, even halfway, Koshta Hega. And I'm not saying I'm 100% there. The only 100% is the Guru. And so the thing is, this whole idea of the Masands system is almost like the modern Sant system or SGPC or Giani system, yeah? It's not much different. And their Khalsa is one who is outside religious hierarchy. The Khalsa is one who says, God is inside me, Jagata Jyot, Jaber Nisabasar. He is a Khalsa who sees the light of God within their own heart. Antarjami is in your del, and you see that light of Paramatma, and then you don't give two what people say or what society says. You become free of it. You become a whirling dervish. You become intoxicated in the divine. And the religious massive, they hate life. Life is difficult. They're trying to get out of Jarasilak June. They're trying to find God. God in your heart. That's a Khalsa. One who realizes it within the heart and starts to actually live life and seeing gratefulness of life and say thank you. You know, Dera kita jato nahi menu jo katoi. It's somebody who realized that state of gratefulness, saying, Why Guru, thank you for my existence. Thank you for this opportunity of life. And you know what? Because I see you within me, and I can say, Why Guru Ji ka Khalsa, Why Guru Ji ki Fateh, I'm fearless, and let's go for it. Let's make the world best we can make it. That's a Khalsa, and that's what Maharaj is referring to in that.
Okay.
Hukum. My understanding.
Yeah, no, that makes more sense. Yeah. Which makes sense because the Masands are essentially a hierarchical priest system as we've been discussing. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you know, like you're sitting there asking the priest to pray on your behalf.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's like Catholic indulgences and like
an intermediary. Yeah. We don't need intermediaries between us and God. Even look, Pritam Bhagoti Simarke, first comes the Bhagoti, yeah? Fear Guru Nanak is in the Ardas, right? And even that's been adulterated. That doesn't mean that. Pritam Bhagoti Simarke, Pritam first Bhagoti Simarke, first meditate on the Bhagoti. And then the modern day SGPC Singh Sabha is Fear Angad, then it says, Pritam Bhagoti Simarke Guru Nanak le, then remember Guru Nanak. The Guru doesn't need to be remembered. What that means is Guru Nanak also meditated on that Bhagoti. Fear Angad, then Guru Angad Dev Ji did. Then Ram Das se hoye sahai, even Guru Ram Das, Siri Bhagoti Ji sahai, he saw the sanctuary of the Siri Bhagoti of Vaheguru Shakti. Is bowing down, each Guru is bowing down to the Bhagoti there in that Chandi Divar. Look how they've changed it because they're Masand. Because they want it to be hierarchical.
And they've done the same with like Chope Sahib, not to read
that's
off
it.
like
That's how Maharaj begins with Garbani in Dasam Sri Bhagoti Ji Sahai. I have the protection of the sword of the Ard Shakti. Right? And so the thing is, you look at when you have that feeling that you're protected, you don't need any intermediary. So Khalsa's the one outside of superstition. We don't need holy men. We are holy men.
Yeah.
So, you know,
the whole point of being sovereign.
Yeah, Santalal Singh, he wrote a book about the Buddha Lal. and he was a Sant, and he was the son of a Nahang Singh, and his book is one of the first ones about the Nahang Ityas. It's called Guru Ki Laadliyan Faujan. Might be online somewhere.
I'll try.
And it's in Gurmukhi, and he writes in there, the Khalsa is a Panth of Brahm Giani, and the Nahang Singh is the original Khalsa. Yeah. And the Khalsa, every single Nahang in the Buddha Dal is a Brahm Giani to a lesser, bigger or smaller extent. And he goes, that is the Khalsa, one who has spirit, not just only physical sovereignty, like Maharaja Ranjit Singh, but spiritual sovereignty. We don't need any intermediary other than the Shabad. Yeah. If you go to a Sant, what's the Sant going to tell you to do? Seva karo, Simran karo. Yeah? You know, this is like Baba Jiginder Singh of Rakaba. When I went to Babaji, I've got so much respect for him, I said to him, Babaji, naam baksho. He goes, no one can baksh naam on you. You have to go and sit there and do your mala. Mm. And then I realized, wow, you know, this is the difference between him and Sant.
We're talking about Babaji. The other day I did a podcast with Jasmeet Singh about the role of Baba Santa Singh Ji within kind of the politics of 1984. And he was talking about Babaji's Nitnem starting at 12 and ending at 7 in the morning. And I think things like that puts it into perspective, because everyone likes to talk. Like even with this podcast, like it looks like I'm doing a hell of a lot. I ain't doing jack. These people are putting in 7 hours of Nitnem. Like that's the real Kamai and the real work.
Exactly. That's the real bhakti.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, you have to go and do your bhakti. You know, and in a Guru Gobind Singh, in the Khalsa, not only is a Khalsa warrior, he's a Kshatri or she's a Kshatri. He sits there, she sits there, does bandagi on a Kalpur. Mm. And that's why the Guru is not an intermediary in the Ardas. You're not bowing to Guru Nanak. You know, it doesn't say first meditate on the sword, then Guru Nanak and Gurus. Because then the Guru is not acting as an intermediary. The Guru is acting as a transmitter of the word, of Naam, of Shabad, and asking you to meditate on the Shabad.
No, definitely. We have got quite a bit to try and cover, so I'm just going to move on to the next bit. We briefly discussed that there was an old initiation ceremony, which we'll briefly cover in a second. But basically, it seems to be that this new initiation ceremony, the Khalsa initiation ceremony, according to Sainik Path, the institution of the Khalsa is Guru Gobind Singh Ji's life mission. Chopai Singh says that Guru Sahib introduces Kirsada for Pahul even to impart a distinct identity to the Sikh Panth. Chopai Singh says 1697, not 99, but again, we'll get into the dates in a minute. Gaur Singh, interestingly, is the first pre-colonial text to mention the request of heads. After 3 calls, a Sikh steps forward who was taken into a tent where a male goat was slaughtered, and this is repeated 5 times. At which point, water is added to a vessel, upon which Bani is recited, and Mataji puts Patas in the water. If we follow Gaur Singh's account, right? Gaur Shish is kind of similar to Gaur Singh. You could argue he's probably read Gaur Singh's manuscript or heard about it, and perhaps just recounting that. But separately, it differs in that it wasn't Guru Gobind Singh Ji who slaughters the goats, but the individuals who come forward. Gaur Shish also adds that Jap Sahib, Japji Sahib, Sohaiya, Chope, and Anand are all recited, and so were 3 verses of Shastra Naman. What's interesting about that, just as a side note, is the fact that, like, they're referencing Bani that's from Dasam Granth. So if Dasam Granth wasn't relevant, they wouldn't be referring to it, obviously, right? I know those accounts differ slightly, and everyone listening is probably like, oh my God, like, that's very, very different to the kind of the sanitized religious version we have of what happens at Vaisakhi 1699. But from your reading of Sikh history, what can you tell us about what happens and also when it happens?
Really good question. And the thing is, there's a lot of things in what you just said in that bit of information.
Yeah.
So I want to break it down a little bit. First thing, let's go back to the original source, which is Sri Dasam Granth, as you've said.
Yep.
You've linked it into that narrative. So what does the master of the falcon, of the royal steed, Kalgidhar Maharaj, what does Guru Gobind Singh Sache Pasha, what does he say from his Siddhi Mukvak, from his holy mouth? And he says, Thad piyo mein jor kar, bachan kaha se nyay, panchale tab jagt mein jab tum karo sahay. So in Vichitra Natak, that's a peak bit of that Bani, like it reaches a crescendo. It reaches a like after Maharaj talks about his apni katha of what happened before, why he ended up here, and everything else that went on. Maharaj says, I stood before that divine mysterious being, a god, and with my head down, I said, I can only create this Panth if you Sahay. Remember Sri Pagoti Ji Sahay? if you protect me, if you assist me, if you're with me in Kaljug to create this Khalsa. So Maharaj is stating his purpose to create the Khalsa, as Senapat has rightly stated, that's his purpose, yeah? And then that goes into the whole mythology that people have to look at, where, Samundra ki Guru Tegh Bahadur in his past life is aiding Durga, and then he promises her a son. And then from his Shakti, Dushdaman is born, the Rishi. And then from the Rishi who's meditating, Dushdaman, as he's meditating on a kal, on a skin, with his sa, with his breath, he creates these million Shanamikuru lions, yeah, who go down and destroy the demon of Rakat Bij and drink the blood of that demon and destroy him. And then therefore they destroy that duality of the demon. And then the Khalsa in that mythology is the reincarnation of that same mission to destroy the dualistic being in Kaljug, or the duality of Kaljug, even on the psychic level, spiritual level, to make everything ik. Yeah? And so, the sword, Maharaj said, ik did the way spata hatsui. The sword is what makes one into two, but the sword can also make two into one through the Shabad, yeah? That's why we take the initiation of the double-edged sword. It's a symbolic, right? And it all goes back to that mythology, yeah? And that mythology, why the people don't like it, because it's Indic.
Yeah.
And it goes back into this whole Indic worldview. But it's his own worldview in the Indic worldview. It's unique to itself. There isn't another worldview like that in India. And so please, my brothers who are against what I'm saying, also acknowledge what I'm saying there. There's some truth in what I'm saying. And so the thing is unique to itself because it's Niara, yeah? It's unique. And so the Khalsa is on that same mission of destroying evil.
Yep.
And Sukh Santa Karanan, Durmat Darnan, Kilpe Karanan, Asarnan, Jaya Jaya Jakaran, Sistyu Baram, Mamprataparan, Jaya Tekan. Maharaj says, I seek the shelter of the sword, which makes the saints happy, which destroys the evildoers, yeah? In the beginning, Sirikaji ki Ustat, in Bajitra Natak. And so Maharaj says that his purpose, yeah? Which is Taram Yuddha Jai, I desire to have the holy war, or the war for good, to defeat evil, yeah? The duality, the oppression, the tyranny, the injustice. And so that is the purpose of the Khalsa. And that's why the Khalsa is a Kshatriya. Khalsa is not a passive sant. It's not Mahatma Gandhi, bless his soul. It's not somebody in the loincloth. It's somebody who has the Kashera, which is from the wrestling tradition and connected to Hanuman. And I don't care if you call me RSS, you could call me all day long. It's connected to Hanuman. It's in the old Rehitnamas. And all the Shastra, the Kara connected to Shivji, and the Kesh connected to Chandi. And because in that worldview, the Khalsa has got a mission even the gods are supporting. Even the gods support it. Even the gods want that Taram. And Maharaj gives the example of where Krishna destroyed Kanchkeshi Pakar Kara Garaya Chandi Divar. And there he Durga Sajake, you Pagoti, even you made Durga. Devta da Nas Karaya. That's a Khalsa's mission. Now we become Devta ourselves. We follow them. We become a bunch of Masands ourselves, me the biggest one. And if we're going to change the Panth and make the Maryata what it was, first thing is we need to get rid of the SGPC. Sharomani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, Masandadi Mandali, is where the Masand get together in a committee. What Sanskrit term is committee? What Farsi term is committee? What Gurumukhi? There's the word committee coming Guru Granth Sahib. Prabandhak Committee, that tells you all. It's a bloody foreign invention. And it shouldn't be within our Panth. And then that's what the Khalsa is against. And that's the mission of the Khalsa. And so the first part is, what is the Khalsa? Is a Kshatriya. We do not take Guru Granth Sahib the Paul, even though Guru Granth Sahib is present to give us Naam. We take Khande ka Paul, which means we do Shastra Puja as our initiation. The Khanda is given the sweet nectar to drink. We're doing Is Puja. We are pujing the Khande ka Paul. We are drinking the nectar of the double-edged sword to be initiated. And so number one, that I'd say the Khalsa has a practical purpose based in mythology of India, in an Indian cosmological view, given in Vijitra Natak. I mean, that's the first part of the question. The next part is about the historical details. Now, we suppose that Sikh writers all competed with each other to write a better account of the Amrit Sanchar because we're egotistical and assume they were the same. No, they were Gurmukhs. And they did Sangat of Brahm Giani. They did Sangat of the Guru. They did Sangat of Pai Mani Singh. It was Pai Mani Singh, Senapat, They're in the Guru's retinue. They weren't there to compete with each other. The reason they wrote different accounts is they knew you would read the other accounts and they were bringing to light different details. They weren't opposing each other like us on our posts, arguing with each other online. So we're looking at it different. Let's reassess Sikh history. Sikh history is a continuation of history, and the reason Kavi Santokh Singh writes Surya Prakash is to bring out different details. He's not trying to write what they wrote before. He's trying to bring new information to light, and each writer is trying to bring a new detail which was not in the original one. So that's the number one. Let's look at it in that way instead of like in the way that we're trying to look at it one against the other.
Well, I think what's interesting is Gaur Singh works. Gaushish seems to work off Gaur Singh's work, and they all seem to work off like, as you have with history and historiography, is they all seem to kind of work off the one that comes before them. The details seem to get deeper the more we move away from the event. So for argument's sake, Gaushish is saying that there's Panj Baniya red, whereas Gaur Singh is saying that it just says Bani was red. I'm not sure why it's referring to.
There's more detail.
Yeah, so it seems to be that.
But you see that, my premise, that proves that, doesn't it?
Yeah. So they're not competing with one another. Not the early writings anyway. It's more so the fact that they're just accounting for an event that's happened from whatever perspective they have.
You never hear Ratan Singh or Kavi Santokh Singh saying, the writer before me got Siga, and I'm saying this now.
They work hostile.
We suppose that from our own intellectual ego.
But that's like a modern Western academic.
There you go,
isn't it?
So throw that in the bin. That's not the way to look at it. And so the first thing is, each writer is trying to bring a different detail about the Amrit Sanchar.
Yeah.
And now this gets complicated now. This is the bit I didn't want to get into, but you forced it, yeah? There was not one Amrit Sanchar. And this is why there's different dates. Because there were a series of Amrits, yeah? And there were a series of events that led up to what we can say is 5 Kakar, 5 Baniya, and the Amrit as we know it. Yeah?
Yeah. So that's a given.
So if you look at Ratan Singh Pangu and you look at his account of Guru Maharaj and he talks about the Bakre, if you look at it, that account is separate from the other Khalsa account. Why? Because it was a separate account. He's not mad that he puts this somewhere else in the book. That's actually a separate thing that happened at another time. So these different events, the reason people are confused is because between 1666 to 69, maybe even into the next year, like I don't know, because the calendar, I'm not the best.
Yeah. And is that why there's a confusion?
That's a confusion as well about the dates, because in India the date goes across the other way, right?
Okay. And they follow what
Vikram calendar, yeah, because it will go from 1699 to 1700, yeah. And so then our calendar here doesn't
match up. Yeah,
doesn't match up. That's the number one issue. And then the number two issue is you've got, like, say, the first Amrit Sanchar possibly could have been, and I'm clutching at straws here, and I'm being academic, Sangat. I'm not saying this is religious.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily true. We're just elaborating.
We're elaborating. Maybe it could have been like Keep Your Kish, which comes into one of the first Hukamname. Could present yourself in the Sangat with Kish.
Okay.
Then the next one.
It's almost like gearing the Sangat.
Yeah. Then the next one could be presenting yourself with Kish and a Sirisal.
Yes,
and so on, and then it builds up to the formalized Amrit Sanchar that we know.
So, because I think then what you've highlighted is that with a modern religious lens, we look at the Amrit Sanchar and Vaisakhi as this huge crescendo, and actually you're saying and to be fair, Gurdwara says the same thing in his book, it's a series of, and to be honest, so does Sendapat and a lot of these early writers, they see it as a period of time rather than it all happening just on one day.
Because we're trying to make a McDonald's version.
Yeah. We're trying to basically condense it and
it happened over a period of time, so it developed, and it happened according to the circumstances. And sorry, I want to interrupt. And it's because one Hukamnama was issued to the Sangat around 1700. I think you've even quoted it, yeah?
Probably.
Which is saying to bear arms and to come to the Guru's presence bearing arms and kish or something like that.
Yeah.
And so there's a period of time where where the Guru is asking for weapons and horses.
It's almost like formalizing.
Formalizing, yeah. And it's happening not in one go.
No.
because that's what you tell, like, I don't want to sound bad, the Bindu, yeah? Oh, you know.
Well, that's like a nursery level education, whereas we're trying to take it slightly higher and elaborate on it a little bit.
What we do know, it happened at Vaisakhi.
But that's a period, that's like a whole month though.
Yeah. So what we know is that this ceremony
Happened in a month.
happened at Vaisakhi, at a gathering, which possibly was weeks long. That it happened with a Khanda, that the Guru asked for heads, that a rant was given, that Bani was read.
That is given on those dates, like it's read out. Okay.
And a Hukamnama is already issued about how people should come prepared.
Before they even get there. Okay.
So, you know, these are solid things, yeah?
Okay.
Now, what we're discussing is, was there Bakra? Was there Panjvaniya? And all these kind of things. And what I'm saying is, these were put together at different times. That's why Ratan Singh Pangu, Shaheed, Nang Singh, that's why he gives two accounts, because those actually happened at two different times. He wasn't stupid. He was the grandson of a Shaheed Singh. He knew the Ityas. And so this happened in a few events, of different levels of rayat given.
It's like, I'm not trying to caricature it or turn it into a silly metaphor, but it's almost like Brexit. It didn't happen over one day. It happened over a period of time.
That's it.
And similarly,
that's it.
This is the community is going through a phase of change, and that change doesn't happen in one.
And the document evidence of the Hukamnama show that development.
Yeah.
And the Ityas shows that, the narrative show that. So then also the next thing that we need to talk about is also the red, like the Pyare Singh red. Hardly any copies of it, very hard to date. But in there, there's Panjbaniya plus even more Baniya. There's extra Savaiye and there's, more in line with what Buddha Dal.
Well, if Korshish is quoting that Panjbaniya I read, as in there are a number of references that don't necessarily Panjbaniya, but they list at least 5. Or if not more, 7 in some cases.
Look, you made me remember something important. In the Sri Guru Panth Prakash by Ratan Singh Pangu, the exegesis by Baba Santa Singh, which is published by the Buddha Dal. By, I think it was CSJS Amritsar, my Seva Bazaar. And in the Katha where Ratan Singh Pangu mentions Jap Jap, like Japji Sahib, Jap Sahib as the Baniya. The modern day Sikh Singh Sahib said 2 Baniya was said. But what Baba Santa Singh says there is, that means the Panjbaniya, because he's not trying to list them. He's not trying to make a complete list, how we would want as English educated people.
Religious dogmatism.
Right? He just says Jap Jap as in Panjbaniya. Baba Santa Singh says that. And I trust Baba Santa Singh's exegesis of that. And you'll find Jap Jap come many times, apana de Nitanayam karna. And so that's an important point. And also, going back into what you were talking about. I mean, I'm looking at my PhD thesis here and the interconnection between what we're talking about. There's too much for me to remember. So Kesha Singh Shibbar in Bansavari Dhamma, he links the creation of the Khalsa with the destruction of the Turks.
Which is what we're discussing.
What we're discussing. And again, from what Bani, the Chope Sahib, which is the 4th Bani, with the quote, Sakal Malesh Karo Ran Kahta, from the Nithanin. So he's connecting here again into this whole warrior thing, this rebellion against the establishment and the establishment of Sikh sovereignty of the Khalsa Raj. And then here again, you've got why I wanted to talk about Pyare Singh is about this whole warrior thread and practical element. So Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj says to Pyare Singh, I myself, Sri Mukwa, communicated the job and Savaiye for calming the minds of my followers and of nerving them for battle. Again, Khande ki por, the juice, the essence of the double-edged, the ras of the double-edged sword. And Pyare Singh Ji, if we take him to be the author of this Rehitnamas, that Guru Gobind Singh has dictated this Rehitnamas to the beloved Panj Pyara, he writes this. He says this: first, he should recite the entire Japji from the beginning to end, the Jap from the beginning to the end, the Chobe, 2 lots of 5 Sawi individually. the opening words of some of those Surveya, this is my footnote. Opening words of some of the Surveya, Snava Dina ki Pratpal, Path to Guru Benastan, Sasadev Sabaprat, and then the body of Anand Sahib, yeah? And so all of those, again, the Dasam Granth Baniya had there, and the Hujur Sahib Sikhs still do those as nippling, yeah? And so then that's talking about the Amrit child. And then again, connected to the Akandi Nahang Singhs, he wears a white kutch and a turban of blue. Faithfully, he repeats both Japji and Jap. He knows by heart, Senior Karl Ustad, I don't, and Jabdi Divat, I don't. The hair covering his body he protects, and never will he participate in a charade, to ancestors. He loves the Siri Guru Granth Sahib, which burns the 5 evil impulses. I'm thought 5 evil impulses, yeah. And then Kaur Singh, going on to 1751, mentions, I think, some of the Ks.
Yeah.
Guru Granth, Guru Panth, Teg and Teg, many ideologies, Guru Mantar.
Yeah.
He quotes Sanskrit Salok, and he expresses the position of the Khalsa as the third path from Islam and Hinduism, and near identical verses to Ugradanti. And then he talks about that the Guru narrates the Rehit. So some people doubt the Rehitnamas, but he says in 1751, after hearing the Katha by Mani Singh and penning it, that the Guru expounded the Rehit, obviously by Chauba Singh, Prahlad Singh or Prahlad Rai, Prem Samara Granth and others, yeah? And so, again, in Keshar Singh Shibar's 1769, he employs Ugradanti all the way through his text. And so, there's a lot going on in here. And Koshish, which you mentioned about Panj Gagar, he says a blue dastar, doesn't he? But he says Nidla, yeah? Which the Nahangs insist that Nahang Singh should wear a Nili dastar, or what people call nowadays Geshki, yeah?
Okay, you mentioned the Panj Mukte, which we will get to in a second, but I just want to go back to the goats. You can argue Koshish is going off Kaur Singh's account, and Kaur Singh is the one to mention the presence of the goats being beheaded. Koshish slightly changes his tune in terms of he's saying that it's the individuals who come forward that slaughter the goats, not Guru Sahib himself. To be fair, it doesn't matter who does it. The goats are slaughtered as far as pre-colonial texts are concerned. What is going on there? What is because obviously you would have had to consider it in your PhD thesis. What's going on there? But secondly, is that where Chatka comes from? Is that why at Hazur Sahib they will do Chatka of goats and then do Shastra, Puja, etc. with its blood? I guess what I'm actually asking is, what's going on in the initial Vaisakhi ceremonies? And then secondly, how has that tradition kind of been continued, in particularly by the Nahangs?
The Khalsa Panth is a military organization. And remember, there's this book by this French scholar, he wrote it in French, and it says the Sikh military, the Khalsa Panth, the military of the Sikhs or something. You must have heard it. You must have seen it. I've got a copy of it here in my library.
Me too.
And I thought, wow, this guy was intelligent. He already put it there, yeah? Because he's read through these, like Haridhan Gupta, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Like similar to that.
Yeah, similar kind of
writing French history. Yeah. And I know a bit of French. My daughter's French. I know what I remember Tanda. And I've read through it and I was astounded by his knowledge. And so, the thing is, if you've got a military organization, what is the ethos of any military? Sacrifice. What is Chatka of a goat? A sacrifice. What is the Chatka of the Panj Pyare? Beheading them. A sacrifice. That's why Trump, in a very bad tone, he said Guru Gobind Singh believed in human sacrifice.
Ernest Trump. Not Donald Trump.
Ernest Trump.
Yeah.
This is what Trump said in Munich in one of his talks for Christians, because they were against this whole idea of human sacrifice and paganism, right?
So they barbarian.
Yeah. So he equated it as the same, the Panj Pyare. So look, let's just say, let's not try and be historical about it. Right? Let's try and take it away from...
Let's not be rational.
Let's get away from rationality. Because
it ties you up in knots.
It ties you up in knots.
Yes.
Let's look at the essence of why the Chatka or the beheading of something is involved. What does it represent symbolically? That's how you should look at Indian texts. What do they symbolize? Yeah. What's the essence? It means sacrifice.
Yeah.
And in the Mahanirvana Tantra, a very ancient text in India, you have the idea that a human being has pashu birti. We have animal desires. Then it says above the animal desires, we have human needs of love and emotions. It says, above the human needs, we have veer, we were warriors, we have the ability to sacrifice for nobility, and above that is Parampurusha, enlightenment. You look at Joseph Campbell, a hero with 1,000 faces, yeah? The same thing, isn't it? The same idea. Look at Sigmund Freud's psychology, is essentially what we just said there, right?
Yeah.
Super consciousness, id,
Yeah,
human, yeah?
layers.
Layers, right? It's the same principle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the Jataka represents killing or sacrificing our animal nature for the wider good.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair.
You can put it to that.
Yeah.
And the Panj Pyare giving their heads, sacrificing themselves, what for? For the Khalsa Panth. Yeah?
Yep.
And so whether it happened or not, I definitely believe that Guru Gobind Singh took the Panj Pyare's heads. I definitely believe it. Other people won't. I say it's not historical, but I believe there's a lot more to reality than meets the eye. And I just want to go into something, backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
Because I've just got one more page on this in my PhD, but if I may
No, please
share it with the sun.
This is why I turn up.
And so, Ratan Singh Bungle, I remember people say 1841 for Bungle's work, yeah? But it's more like 1800,
Okay.
right? It's more like 1800. That also needs to be looked at. And I believe that Professor Mann, not of Leicester, but Professor Mann, ex-Santa Barbara, New York, he wrote a whole essay that Octoloni, Captain Murray were much earlier. And so 1841 cannot be the date of Panth Prakash. It must be much earlier.
Okay.
When the British were getting their informants, yeah, to give knowledge about, what they were interested in. And so he says that Guru Gobind Singh, after reciting the 33 Savaiye, which we already said, and criticizes the Masands and praises the Khalsa, the Ardas was performed, then the beginning of Bajita Natak was said, and then the Jap we've talked about, and then Anand, some parts of Rehras and Vasi Bhagoti Ji ki. And then Bhai Mani Singh relates this a little bit, that the Granth was for devotion and Dasam Granth was for war. And then this was stirred and included a composition from the Charitra Pakyan. Yeah. And then basically you can find this in their work. And then if you go back to Senapath, which was earlier, he illustrates a strong relationship between the Khalsa and its finalized military role. So you have to look at all of this in a military sense. Does that make sense? Or ethos of sacrifice.
We're trying to look at it from a modern religious sense, and it doesn't match up.
It's not going to match up.
It can't
match up.
Yeah.
Then Senapath describes the Rehn by reiterating the verses of the Teti Savaiye.
So is the Teti Savaiye basically that?
Of course,
It's basically telling you exactly what to do.
In a sense. And he narrates, those who join the Khalsa should abandon the Masands.
Again.
And form a direct relationship to the Guru, including the givings of offerings. Right? That's Senapath. That's on in many verses throughout his
There's a lot of talk about.
Yeah, many verses. I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 verses reiterating that.
And if not more.
Yeah, if not more. And then he also talks about the prescription of ritual head shaving. So we're talking about the Brahmanistic aspect. Yeah? This is also within the book. This is obviously, that we must keep Gish, and Adari and all that, to renounce the hukka, to get a thing of the thoughts, to get people addicted. And then here, what you talked about very early on in our interview, the final command is the Khalsa to abandon all social relations with the 5 retrograde groups. So Masands, and I'll put here, old system of Sikh officials with diocese. Meaning, Ram Rai Kurimar, killers of daughters, women, female infanticide, feticide. Why Jasa Singh Ramgariya was excommunicated. And then the 10th Guru with the Dasam Granth gives the following account of the Masands. If you want to serve the Masands, they say, go and fetch us all your wealth. Go immediately and hand over all your riches. And that is Amrit Savaiye, so the 30 Savaiye, verse 29, which is a feature of all early hagiographic texts of it in there. The most recognizable martial feature of the new Khalsa, present in both modern and traditional Sikh practice, is the wearing of arms and gish, as well as the addition of Singh and Kaur to male and female names respectively. It's interesting that Sukha Singh calls the belt of the sword a Gata Ajano, a Brahman thread. Sukha Singh Gurbalas here, and that's page 70. This new identity was the formalization of the identity the Gurus had already taken on for themselves and consists of the symbolic military attributes of an Indian ruler, which is clearly a continuation from the institutions established by the Sikh Guru. It is clear the dialogues in the Dasam Granth Sahib are an essential part of this military transformation. And I go on to about the feeding the Khalsa, and I might as well talk about that yet because we mentioned it earlier. After the first Khanda Kapal ceremony was concluded, the temple Guru then fed the Khalsa before the Brahmins. This symbolized the breaking away from the Varnal caste system of India. Gaur Singh includes passages from the Dasam Granth is said to have repeated at this time. He provides an explanation of them, as well as a date of 1689, when this composition was first written. The Guru says to Misra, the Brahman offended by this act, Misra, you only receive what is written in your destiny. Do not be angry and overcome your emotions. I've committed no crime. I did not forget. Do not be angry with me. I have won battles with their help. It pleases me to serve them. Yeah?
Yeah.
Which is very, anyone who's read that Saviya is simple
it's clear.
Simple to understand, yeah? To even for people with bad Punjabi like ourselves, yeah? And so that's the major narrative. And then actually after that, then the Chaubi Avatar is completed around 1698.
Okay.
So we're talking in sections, you see.
Yeah. Whereas actually it's one big...
Yeah. And let's look at Ram Avatar, which finishes that Chaubi Avatar.
Yep.
पाएंगे जब ते तुमरे तत्व को आंतरे ने आयो राम रहीम पुराण करान ने कह मत एकला मान्यो सिमरत शास्त्र वेद सबे बॉपी के हम एक ना जानियो सिरी अस्पान कृपा तुमरी कर मैं ना को सब तो बगानियो दोरा सरद्वार छाड़ के गया द्वार द्वार बाहेंगे की लाजस गोविंद दास साहब is doesn't it fit everything we just said? And then that was completed then. And the Ugardanti and all this around the same period, right? So it's the same idea. Right? Just wanted to kind of find...
No, I love that. One thing that you mentioned, and then I backtracked you to the goats, is you mentioned the Panj Mukte. Now, something which is of obviously interest is Koshish's account, is that once the Panj Pyare are initiated, they then prepare Kandadi for themselves and administer it to 5 more Singhs who offer their heads. And Koshish goes on to argue, or goes to suggest even, that these are given the title of Panj Mukte. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji gives them their names: Deva Ram, Ram Chand, Tahil Das, Ishar Das, and Fateh Chand. Yeah. Koshish says in total 40 people took Amrit the day of Vaisakhi. The next day, groups of 5 Singhs would administer Paul to the Sangat that had arrived. So from that account, what I would assume is there is an initial ceremony. Those 5 then initiate the next 5. Those 2 groups then initiate more until there's 40. And then those groups the following day seem to initiate
everybody,
the whole world, essentially, right?
Yeah.
What's kind of, I guess that actually kind of connects to what you were saying earlier about how actually there's a number of events. There's not just one big kind of ceremony and the whole world is initiated in one go. Yeah, that historical account just completely matches up to that. What I'm actually asking then is what role did the Panj Pyare and the Panj Mukte play, apart from obviously being the first and second set of 5 Sikhs to be initiated? And what do other historical accounts say about what's going on at this period?
Very good question. Let's look at, let's go to Bhai Das, number 2. Vaho Vaho Gobind Singh Ape Guru Guru Simra Manai Kalika Khande Ki Villa. The Guru meditated on Kalika. Now is the time of the Khanda. Vaho Vaho Gobind Singh. He's the Guru and the student. So the Guru, you miss something big in all of this, yeah? Sorry to say, obviously. Guru Gobind Singh took Amrit from the Panj himself.
So this is what I was going to get on to later, which is none of these accounts seem to state that, though.
Well, he did.
Okay.
Yeah, well, he did.
I'm not saying he didn't before someone tries to string me up by my bootstraps. But what I mean is that just going off what the text was saying, and again, I'm not challenging the narrative. It just seems that so far, most of them don't suggest that.
And so this is the thing, is let's look at Guru Granth Sahib. Does it tell you how to do the part? It can't. Just tell you how to make Granth Prasad. It doesn't. Sometimes we know what happened.
Yeah.
Because it's obvious. It doesn't mean it has to be written down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, Guru Gobind Singh, he went from Guru Gobind Rai to Guru Gobind Singh.
Yeah.
And we all know in our Punjabi law and our tales that that's what happened on that day.
Yeah.
Even if historians don't give it, right? And so the thing is, the that's the danger of taking these things literal.
Yeah, because you can end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater and everything.
Remember, by the last two, he's telling you that.
Yeah.
Aap Guru Chilla, yeah? So the Guru gets initiation from the Panj. You know, a Fanla was tied on Guru Gobind Singh by Panj Singhs, who he gave it to first. And then they tied it on Guru Gobind Singh, which is according to Koshish Zola, right? So, you know, Sarup Singh. Now look, Panj Pyare, they represent the archetypal attributes of Guru Gobind Singh. They are Dharam, you know, the kind of virtues of the Guru, yeah? They represent his form, yeah? Now the next 5, and then remember the Guru expounds the Red. So symbolically, the next 5 represent those who've completed the Red completely. Okay. And that's why the mysticism is they merged into light, yeah? Yeah, they disappeared.
Yeah.
And that's, again...
Which is a separate thing altogether, I guess.
Yeah. Because they are so much in the Red that their body, their kundalini, their energy goes so high up into the Akash that they actually are no longer physical beings anymore. And that's why the Nahangs, they believe whenever the Panth is in problems, the Panj Mukte, Charlie Mukte and Shaheed Singhs come back to help. Baba Mit Singh, 5 Shaheed Singhs tied a fatla on him and gave him Amrit when he was a child. And then he brought back all the manuscripts, all the Red, the Sera Puja, the Shastra Puja is nearly finished on most of the Tats, even in Buddhalal. Baba Mit Singh brought all that back and all the Granths and everything else. And so there's a Nahang lore about that. And so this is the mysticism now about the Nahangs. And so that's, you know, the Panj and Mukte represent that completion of Red and that kind of complete power that a real Khalsa has in all dimensions. The Khalsa is a multi-dimensional being rather than a Mayadari being just on a military mission, It is a lot more spiritual and mystical than that. So I'd say that's what the second group represent.
Okay.
And then I'd say that in my view, the overall narrative of these shows, it happened stepwise.
Yeah.
And it must have, right? It must have. And you can't give Amrit to that, 80,000 people in a few hours. It's going to be a process.
Yeah, of course.
And so what we're saying here is that from between 1696 to 1700, around this period, there are Vaisakhis, there are ceremonies, which leads to what we know as the Amrit and Jat.
Yeah.
And that's what all the confusion is about. That's what the goat slaughter is about.
One thing that's interesting is Koshish actually states that Guru Gobind Singh Ji gives by Nandlal Charan Paul and not Khanda Paul to make him a Sikh. What's going on there? Why is there a difference? And doesn't that suggest that not everyone is meant to be a Khalsa?
Look, the modern narrative, you've asked a really, really good question again, right? I love your questions. This is the issue. The modern day Sikhi, which is based on anglicized, Presbyterian Church of England version through Macaulay, into the SGPC and his agents like
who we discussed later, but
Dan Singh Nabha, Bhai V Singh et al. Right? They all follow that same kind of ideology. These guys love uniformity to the level of monoculture of bacteria. I can't say, I'm not saying they were completely like that. I'm saying there's an element of their writings that's like slanting towards that. Because obviously, in a way, they had to survive. I understand they were living in oppression. They had to do what they did.
Yeah.
But they edited a lot of text. They did a lot of stuff. I'm sure they were really saintly, really good. And I can show where they've edited text. And I'm prepared to even go to the limit and show the Sangat what happened, right? But I understand why they did what they did. And I'm not criticizing them. They did what they had to do. But what they try to show is there was this uniform Khalsa, or this uniform ceremony, this uniform Red, which we know from Sekatiyas going through, picking through. Not the case, is it?
No.
And so if you look at Khalsa Dharam Shastra Avtar Singh Vahiriya on the, from his, which was his patron was the Sardar Game Singh Bedi, on the lineage of Guru Nanak. When he wrote that, he talks about a different type of Amrit, And so first Amrit is Naam Da Amrit. So, when you're named by Guru Granth Sahib, that's a diksha. That's not just that your naming ceremony. That's what they've made it now. That's you've given a name from the Guru and it's meaningless. No. To be named from Guru Granth Sahib, from Shabad Guru, is getting naam. You understand? It's not meaningless. That's a very deep spiritual thing. As a baby, you're brought in, a shabad, a random reading, which represents you as a human being, comes from a Kalpurk, and the first letter is taken, and that's imparted on you as a naam. It's first naam.
You sure?
Right? This is how blind we've gone, yeah? Because we've become pious Christians who don't like rituals. Now the second one, don't have empty rituals, that's the issue. Second one, where Part Gurbani is read, like the Sarovar of the Darbar Sahib, contrary to Ranjit Singh. So the thing is, according to him, it's just water. No, it isn't. That water's here in the Gurbani. That means that Amrit Sanchar water is just water then. According to that idiot, actually say it, according to him.
Yeah, but that's also
wait.
like a shit understanding of science.
Of course he is. Of course he is. But look, you see how stupid he is. If he's saying the Darbar Sahib Sarovar is just water, then the Amrit Sanchar water is just water. So the fact is, how stupid is that? The Darbar Sahib that Jan is listening to Gurbani like the pot of water at the Khanda party is also Amrit. Yeah. And it gives you spiritual energy to drink it, to bathe in it, because it listens to Gurbani. Hello, everyone. If that's not the case, don't even take Amrit.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm shouting it. Right, now the third one is where you get initiation into Naam through a sek, through a seng, and dancing now by Gurmat Martan. So this again is Singh Sabha guy. He says this is initiation form, like the cloth of Guru Granth Sahib. They put a bit of jal through it, and then it's saying like you get Naam.
Okay.
Or somebody
kind of like Charan Paul.
Yeah, kind of like that. Or somebody would do some Gurbani for you, and then they give it to you to drink, and you drink it, and it's saying you got some Naam. That's why the Radha Swamis is so big, because not everybody wants to be a warrior. Some people just want to meditate and do Naam, and they need a ritual for it. They don't want to pick up a Shastra. In society, how many people are in the army?
Yeah.
Why the Gurus were practical. They didn't want every sect to become. That's why I'm answering your question long-winded, yeah? They didn't want every person to be a warrior. Yeah. Maharaj even says to the poets, leave. It's not your time to fight.
Yeah.
It's written in the Ityas. So the thing is, so there was a non-military initiation, which is the third type. And some people call that just like Amrit. It's got different names in history. Now, some Sikh writers say that type of Charan Amrit, was poured into the river, and it was replaced by Khande Kapur. Some writers say that. But you can see why the Guru makes that as a stance at that time. Yeah. Saying, I want you, at this moment, we need to fight. So let's all stand up. Even the weakest of you needs to fight, because that could have been the situation. But that doesn't mean that was his outlook forever for the whole Panth. That's where the people too far.
Because it's saying here that Nandlal is given Charan Paul, which would argue he's got a separate but different purpose.
Yeah. Now the fourth one, again controversial, is Kirpan Amrit. They say it's for Bibiyan,
And that's a question. Did women take Amrit?
They did, because Chaupa Singh Rehitnamas gives the Rehit for women. Why would he include a Rehit for women if women didn't take Amrit? Yeah. And that, I remember Chaupa Singh is not I remember Chaupa Singh's quoted by Baisakhi Namakis and Shibbar, his ancestor, about him recording that, and that has women's code. And so Kirpan Amrit, Hazur Sahib that give Kirpan Amrit. Contrary to public belief, this is not a different Amrit than Khande Kapur Amrit. It's the same Amrit, but a Kirpan is just put through that same Amrit. And it's to symbolize femininity. And that means a non-Kshatriya Amrit again, but somebody who vows to keep their kesh. And it's called Keshank Amrit, and it's for women to keep their kesh. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to keep all the rest of the card or go into battle and fight. The last one is the one where you go to battle and fight and you keep fighting the card. Now, how much sense does that make? Yeah, it makes logical sense. And that explains all the different Amrits and jars, explains all the different hukamnames and all the different accounts.
Rather than us trying to attach all of that to one singular event and one singular trajectory of history.
So Avtar Singh Vahiria, he did a miracle by putting the Sikh praxis together.
Yes.
Because he puts that together and that explains the history itself. You have to look at practices and history together. You can't look at them separately.
Yep.
And if you just look at history by itself, you have that approach of somebody like, W.H. MacLeod, J.S. Gariwal, Gurinder Mann of Santa Barbara, now New York. you're going to fall into a well. Maharaj says about the Rehit, you learn the Rehit from the Khalsa as well. You have to go amongst Khalsa, them vichar ke, like go to Baba Man Singh, Shanme Karori in India, get Parthi, join the Nahang Singhs, go stay there, learn the Maryada, not from shitheads like me. Go there, live with the Nahangs in India, join, you know, instead of being internet warriors like I used to be, and I'm guilty of, go to Punjab, go to see Baba Man Singh, say, I'm here, and learn the Maryada. Yeah, and stay with the Dal for a couple of years. Like you could go to uni for 3 years to feed your dead and your fat belly. If you want to learn Maryada, go to India for a few years, learn Santya Guru Granth Sahib, learn Tanti Sahib, stay there for 3 years, learn your language, learn Punjabi. Even if you're a Western person who's converted to Sikh, go there, stay with Baba Man Singh, Chanwe Karori, Chakravarti, and learn the Maryada.
You referred to Macauliffe earlier in MacLeod. One thing that is interesting is Macauliffe is the first person to state that a Persian historian, Bhutte Shah, argues that a news writer of the period sent to the Mughal emperor a copy of Guru Gobind Singh Ji's address to the Sikhs of Anandpur on the 1st of Baisakhi, Sambat 1756, which adds up with 1699, but we'll go into that in a second. Gadawar's view is that the address isn't, like, he's saying that this eyewitness account can't be true. He says that it can't be true because it starts with a direct statement of revenge, and the eyewitness account argues that the main reason for the Khalsa being established is to seek revenge for Guru Gobind Singh Ji. And then also the chronology is faulty, with the creation of the Khalsa being placed as early as 1675, which doesn't really make much sense. Chronicles of Bud Singh, Bhagat Mal, Kushwant Rai, Ahmad Shah Batala, Ganesh Das, Sohanlal Suri and Aliuddin all follow this same account. They all basically verbatim say that there's an eyewitness. And to be honest, I think I first came across it at university and couldn't find any, there doesn't seem to be any truth to the account. Gadawar's conclusion is that the speech that Bhutte Shah attributes to Guru Gobind Singh Ji on the day of creating the Khalsa is purely an imaginative feat. Direct speech was a stylistic feature of historical works in Persian, and Bhutte Shah's work is quite full of it. From your reading of historical sources, how much truth is in the statement itself, and are there any eyewitness accounts to it besides perhaps some of the pre-colonial texts?
Let's look at the elephant in the room there, Amrit. Yeah, I mean, I would just check my phone, but I loosely. Yeah. And I know the subject reasonably well. Yeah, and so the thing is, all of those chroniclers are not Sikhs.
Good point.
Right. So the thing is, number one, they have a different style of recording history. Most of them write in Persian, Urdu type of language, right? Or you could say what the British called Hindustani, yeah? Yep. And so the fact is, they're writing in that style and they're trying to convey how they see what the Guru's mission is.
So it's a literary structure almost.
Right, like what J.S. Gadiwal says. Now, why is it that Gavi Eastern Talksing doesn't mention that account?
Because it's not based in like the truth.
Not based on the truth.
Yeah.
Why is it that you don't see this anywhere?
Yeah, we don't see anywhere else. It's just these guys.
We've just went through. Let me just go back here. I mean, I go through the Amrit Charan. We went through Guru Gobind Singh's own work.
Yep.
We went through Senapat.
Yep.
We went through Bansavli Nama, Chaupa Singh Rehitnamas, Ratan Singh Pangu. We went through Baba Santa Singh's exegesis of that. We went through Koshish.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Koshish is writing from the part of Vahis, isn't it?
Yep.
Right? Which is a core account. We went through by Dia Singh's Rehitnamas. I mean, we've been through a lot and you've talked about the Hukam Namir around the same time. They could easily mention it or counteract it. And we've been through even Singh Sabha scholars, right? And their works. So for me, I mean, I'm sorry, but
if no one else is mentioning,
the elephant in the room is for Sikhs that document has no meaning.
Yeah. So no point.
Or if it existed.
Yeah, and if it was,
and that's a big if.
Just moving on then, because there's a hell of a lot that I still want to get included. The main point then, date of instituting the Khalsa. Now, what's interesting about this is Chaupa Singh places Vaisakhi in 1697. Most of the other 18th century sources place it between 1695 and 1698, which is obviously a year before kind of the established year within the modern narrative. In fact, a Hukamnama of 1698 to the Sangat of Banur includes an instruction to come at the time of Baisakhi and Holi fully armed to take the Guru's ball even, And Kaur Singh's Gurbalas also places it in 1698. So again, what you were saying earlier about how Maharaj is telling them how to come prepared before the Vaisakhi, the initiation ceremonies even happen. As you were saying, Gurinder Singh Maan from the USA has examined a similar Hukamnama of 1698 and thinks that its contents suggest the existence of the ceremony of initiation again in the same year, not in 99. Furthermore, and some may say I'm probably stretching the truth at this point, but there's a manuscript of Dasam Granth Patna Sahib dated to 1698, almost implying all the new Bani scripture is created for the new Panth. It's almost like the Dasam Granth is created
Exactly.
in order then the literature is created or the scripture is created to then create the institution so it then can use this scripture as its foundation, for want of a better word.
Exactly.
Right? So from the little that I've researched...
And that's why Bhai Mani Singh in Shahid Bilas by Seema Singh, I believe it is, around 1800, he writes that Bhai Mani Singh is sent with a Granth to the Akal Takht Sahib. Now, what would that be? That's Granth.
Yeah.
And that's why the one with the Samkha that day, 1698, which is the exact year it was there, which was the one that was thrown through the window, yeah?
And that's the one that we're referring to, isn't it?
Referring to.
Okay.
That was sent with 5 Singhs and Nishan Sahibs after the Amrit Sanchar. So exactly, you hit the nail on the head. The Khalsa Bible, you can say, if we want to use that term, or the Khalsa guidebook
Is Dasam
is
Granth?
Dasam Granth.
Yeah.
The Book of Princes, you can say, like our political rule, you know, the same as what the British informants were telling the the Brahmins were telling the British.
It's like how people kind of, I guess, refer to Machiavelli's work. Like,
That's
it's like,
right.
it's like the political work.
Yes, that was our work, and our work for learning warfare, Shastra Vidya, for political things, for battle tricks. It was all through Dasam Granth, and people
Worldly issues, basically.
worldly issues, and that's why people need to read it to get worldly sharp. And so the thing is, going back to the different years, this also fits in neatly with Dasam Granth, which you just said here about the extra Baniya, or we can say what is the Apocrypha.
Yeah.
That could have done the Asa Sorat, and so many, you know, Sukhmana, and so many other different Baniya. So obviously you got the 1696 Sarup, which I talked about in our first podcast, yeah? And that one was obviously copied more than the next one.
Yeah.
And so the 1696 Sarup finishes at a certain point, which was the Jope Sahib, and the Zafarnama is appended to it, which again fits in the dates of the Amrit Sanchar, the date of the Charitra Pakyan fits in with the Amrit Sanchar. Then you got the 1698 one,
Yep.
where the Jobi Avtar is now completed, yeah? And then that
ties into what you're saying earlier. about
exactly.
being completely
And now
honest.
that's set to the Sangat of Patna Sahib as well. And it's got the extra Baniya. And then that it proves that Bani La Ugardati is Guru Maharaj's, because it's around the creation of the final Amrit Sanchar of Khalsa, as we formally know it.
Yeah.
Last point you can say, yeah?
Okay.
Through these various ceremonies that happen with the Chatka,
And
with keeping gears, just keeping weapons, getting to the level of what we can say is Panj Kakar, 3 Kakar, maybe going to 5. I don't know. I'm postulating. But because the thing is, when 3 are mentioned in Sarap law, it could be 5, yeah?
But this is the other thing that I would like, because obviously there's a lot of people who make a lot of noise about this on the internet, and I'm not about to name any names because it gives these people more fuel that they don't need. But one thing that I find interesting is we, just like you were saying earlier, we look back at history in terms of from like a modern lens. So for argument's sake, you didn't have Tesco back then, or you weren't going to the shop to buy your boxes. You would be wearing a kashera because that is the cultural norm, so to speak. Like, the kara was a shastra, so you'd probably be wearing it for just want of protection. Like, what I'm trying to get at is that we look at the Panj Kakaras in a prescriptive religious manner in the modern age. But actually, it's more like then it would have played a practical means that people would have probably already be wearing or using. So what I mean is, Guru Maharaj saying, like, be Shastra Tari is just reinforcing something that Guru Gobind Singh Ji has been saying since. So it's not necessarily new in that sense. Just going back to the date.
In the same way, the Bardic tradition of Shebe Pasha,
Yeah.
like the Bardic music of Taddi, Dasam Granth in the Kavata that is in is a continuation of that.
Yeah.
In the heroic.
And it's a military theme or whatever.
Exactly. So it's the institutionalization of that. But I just wanted to allude to something else. When you talk about the Hulla Mahalla, and obviously there's a direct relationship with Shastra Puja there, Ram Avatar is read under Sera, Shastra Puja. We talked about Bhai Mani Singh here, and then obviously Hurma Mahalla, Krishna Avatar, and the Vaniya. But then look, this is what's really important. Why in this period is there a rapid militarization of the Panth? Because the Guru knew from his informants that the Mughals would attack Anandpur Sahib. So you had to get everyone ready.
You had to gear them up.
Because we know only a few years later, Anandpur Sahib is attacked. That's the next thing, and the Battle of Chamkaur Sahib and all the rest of it. So I'm looking through my PhD, and I'm forced to be in historical here. So I'm trying to step historically, try to think. I can't say what the Guru's thinking because I'm nowhere, not even anything under even his feet. I'm not worthy of. But what I'm trying to say on a historical level, why would Guruji do that? Because you have to make a rapid military force to protect the Anandpur Sahib, Punjab.
Like siege.
And what did we mention? Even Amritsar. So the Nishans are set, the Dasam Granth is set.
Yeah. To take it away from Anandpur Sahib, to keep it safe.
To keep everything safe, yeah? To Patna Sahib, that's sent far and wide, yeah? To keep it all safe. Because this big work, yeah? And so you see historically what we're saying makes sense.
Yes.
And what modern day...
Everything's starting to connect. Yeah.
What the modern day narrative is, it's not organic. It's
constructed.
It's very constructed, literal.
For different purposes, right?
Yeah. It's there to divide. He isn't there to bring this together. I'm here to bring it together.
Yeah. Well, that's why I came, because I knew with your PhD thesis, you'd hopefully be the person to ask the questions. Now, what's interesting about the dating thing is that all of the pre-colonial texts seem to be very much in agreement that it's around 1698. I don't think any of them really disagree with one another. The first point, and again, I've done very little research, so I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who know better, but just off the back of what I've read, it seems to be that Gian Singh has a number of statements, and one of them is that 1699 is the year that the Khalsa is created. He seems to be the first one to put that year forward. What's also interesting, though, is he also says a number of other things which don't necessarily hold water. So he declares that
it's like the creation of the Nirmali.
But he also says that there's only...
Wait a second. Yeah. It's interesting because he says that Nirmali are created about the same time. But look at all the other accounts.
And they go against what he's saying.
And that's 1888 Gian Singh, isn't it? And so the thing is, they're not mentioned before 1888 in Ityas. I mean, they have literature, they have Sampradaya, but they don't have a creation story until Gian Singh comes along.
But what's also interesting, he says a number of other things. He says there's only 4 main recensions of Dasam Granth, which we know is untrue. Colophons within numerous manuscripts prove it to be wrong. Even the Soldat Committee is able to locate 32 manuscripts. Again, that's a whole different podcast, which we've already done. Gian Singh also states that Guru Gobind Singh Ji did not kneel to accept Amrit from the Panj Pyare. Now, personally, I think much of that is a theological issue within himself.
But wait a second, why would he say that if Guru Gobind Singh didn't get Amrit? If that wasn't an idea? You see, why would he say that? Okay, let me rephrase it so I'm not academic. I want to say to people understand it. He would only say that if there was an idea that the Guru kneeled and took Amrit from Pyare.
Yeah.
Which is the common consensus, right?
Yes.
That the Guru took Amrit from the Panj. And this is the whole issue with the Nirmali, why they criticize Ugatanti Bani, Sarablo Granth, and, Pandit Tara Singh Garotam in... Why did you get the name right? It was Nirnay Sagar.
Okay.
CD Gurmat Nirnay Sagar, 1877.
Yep.
So Pandit Tara Singh Garotam, and he says, how can the Khalsa be Satgur Pura? And Maharaj says, Khalsa mera Satgur Pura in Sarabul Granth, yeah? He says, so Sarabul Granth can't be written by Guru Gobind Singh because of that. And he quotes Ugardanti can't be because of this and that. So anything that praises the Khalsa for that level, then Nirmali deny.
But doesn't that go against everything we've just discussed?
Exactly, because is what they're doing there, the same Masands, the Brahmanism.
Oh, I see. Yeah, they got a vested interest in order to break that because it takes away their role and authority. I see. Yeah.
This whole thing
kind of cause and effect in this case. Yeah.
You understand him?
Yeah.
You get it?
And it's also the fact that 1690, I know this is going to sound quite simplistic, but it's also the fact that 1699 is it looks like a better number than 1698 is the reason it's picked. As in, I know it sounds really trivial and stupid, but aesthetically, when you look at it on the page, it is more appeasing. Like, is there elements of like simplicity, like rather than kind of dig into it and be like, well, actually, maybe it was 97 or 90. Like, 'cause they all say 98. Like, everyone says.
Let's look at our conversation. We discussed 96.
Yeah.
You went far back as 95.
Yeah.
In one account. You went 96. 98 came a number of times.
Yeah.
99 didn't come once.
No, we haven't even discussed it.
Right. And so I don't know where that's from.
Touche. Fair.
And I've given you my reasons of why I think it's there. Okay? And maybe in Giani's defense, I mean, I'm being academic here.
Yeah.
Which is maybe he's writing something that was forgotten.
Yes. And maybe we need to check the sources and dig into that. Yeah. Who knows? And also, just as we were discussing earlier, there's numerous layers to it, like sending out Hukumname, preparing people, removing the Masands, the Khalsa ceremonies itself, so on and so forth.
Oh, and remember the preamble to Vaisakhi's Wala Mahalla,
Yes.
which is complete military, right?
Yeah.
And people forget that Vaisakhi itself as a ceremony is sitting on the marching ceremony Wala Mahalla. Everyone misses that one, don't they?
I think they never see it as a connection. They never see the two together. It's a separate event.
See it, and you have to look at it in that way. And then they forget that it's after this period that Anandpur Sahib
It's
sieged and everything else.
And John God happens.
And it's all connected. It's all connected. And it just shows you how much of a great general and emperor Guru Gobind Singh was, because he preempted their attack and he preempted their plans. And he was already preparing the Sangha for that, else we wouldn't have made it through. I wouldn't be sitting here in Bana and you wouldn't be
a Sikh.
And I wouldn't be Nansing and you wouldn't have taken Amrit from Buddha.
Nope.
Right?
No.
Because it's because of what Guruji foresaw there that we are here. And so we got to look at it, that whatever was happening, call it ceremonies, call it whatever you want, he was militarizing Sangha.
Yes, definitely.
Defend themselves against an imminent attack. And in the same order of Miri Piri, this was a spiritual event rather than just a secular event.
Yes,
it had mystical connotations for Sikhs in their cosmological worldview. It wasn't just some meaningless thing that they're being attacked colonially and they need to yield their power. Their power was God-given and they were going to protect their sovereignty.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Does that make sense?
No, completely. I think that ties into also what you were saying about earlier about Rehitnamas and kind of the injunctions that are discussed straight after the initiations or the Khalsa ceremony. So Gaur Singh says, like pretty much all of the pre-colonial texts agree that once you've taken Khanda di Pahul, you become a Kesdari, Shastradari Sikh. And they are both the distinctive features, hair and weapons, basically. So I think, again, the whole discussion of Panj Kakar is the framing of it. Because if you're Shastradari, you're probably going to have your Kara, your Kirpan or something already. You're going to have your Kes because you're Kesdari. And then Kasheda is a practical means. My opinion is that some things don't need to be prescribed at certain times because it's part of like the cultural consensus or whatever. Like if that, like you wouldn't leave the house today without shoes on. Like I know it sounds really stupid, but it's that kind of thing.
Kish is going to go with a Ganga.
Yeah, you're going to need a
Ban is going to go with a Kara.
Yeah, you're going to need a comb to comb your hair. Like otherwise you're going to end up like with dreads, and that's something that we're not. We're not dreadlocks. We look after our kids and keep it clean, right?
Yeah, we're not yogis.
Yes, that's the word.
We're not like we're yogis in Nam, but we're not
renunciates.
Yeah, exactly.
So Gaur Singh, like many of the other pre-colonial texts, says that the Khalsa, like you mentioned earlier, are not to associate with the Masands, the Tirmali, the Ramrais, Minas, those who cut their hair. They are to shun, hukkar, never smoke, or cut their hair, and all castes are to eat as one. Koshish's Guru Ki Sankhya says all previous births and karams have been annulled. The Khalsa were given the visible form of Kal, as in death. And he also references Panj Kakar, in this case, the Kiski Kanga Kirpan Kara Kishera. I think you referred to that earlier about that being kind of a blue the start. My question is, what is your kind of, because if, as you rightfully said, if we start going into the nitty gritty of like this, Rehitnamas says this and this Rehitnamas says that, we're going to be here forever. But overall, what is your view put forward by the Rehitnamas and the injunctions, especially the pre-colonial one, and what are their biggest agreements and perhaps disagreements? Because one thing that's very clear is they all say you take under the pole, you are Shastra Tari and you are Case Tari, like point blank. There's no question on that.
You're asking what is the
consensus
of the Rehitnamas?
Yeah.
I think the Rehitnamas, they all meet in a very, very simple way. Yeah.
Yeah.
First is a Singh or Singhani is one who recites Gurbani,
Yep.
does Naam, does Seva the Sangat.
Yep.
So the basics of Sikhi,
Yep.
and fundamental. The next part is, as you discussed, the appearance, Kish, Shastatari. They all agree on that. And then the other things, they all agree on what is forbidden. So, for instance,
The shard cadet. Yeah.
to shave, to
Tobacco.
to kill Kurimar, to go to the reprobate.
Halal is also massively forbidden.
Exactly, halal. And so that's the nature of it, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
And no one can argue with that.
No.
And that's what, if you go to Amrit charge, that's the Rehit.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. Because that's the nature of the Rehitnama. And if you want to know a bit more, Khalsa is the one who rides the horse. Khalsa is the one who practices with the sword.
Yep.
Khalsa is the one who keeps 5 weapons. Then you can go even further, and then he goes into deeper detail about what a Khalsa potentially can be.
Yeah, some of them divulge on dietary requirements, but that itself is a complete kettle of fish on its own right.
Yeah.
Because some say you can eat fish, some say you don't eat meat, some say you can eat meat on particular points and in particular animals.
Yeah.
It's again though, it's obviously reflective of the time that they're writing. Like they're not going to Sainsbury's and buying their corn products or whatever.
Exactly. I mean, the Rehitnama, they're interesting documents because you have authors penning them, but they're writing them for the Guru.
Mm.
And then obviously say I don't know, we're all in the company and the CEO says, write a report, and we all write a report on the company activity. It's not going to be the same, is it? So everyone's got their own view.
Yeah, everyone's got
overall it matches.
Yeah.
And it's written with the jurisdiction of the CEO.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The Rehitnamas, it's a bit like that. And so you're going to get some things exact, some things are different, but it doesn't mean that they're fake because they don't match.
Yeah, completely. But it's also people's what they want also to almost legitimize. Like, as in, I don't know, the author who writes about fish may really like fish, for argument's sake, and it's I don't want to make that something that you don't do. For I know it's a bit of a random, but an example.
Yeah. You've got a point. I think for me, looking at this and having researched Rehitnamas, looked at the Hatlikats, been through the various material English and Gurmukhi, I mean, the thing to look at really is the proto-Rehit, which, that's a term that MacLeod uses, and it's accurate because it's the prototype Rehit for all the other Rehit.
Yeah.
It's the Rehit in the biggest detail. And if you want to understand all the other documents, you have to look at the Prem Samarag. And Prem Samarag, again, the Singh Sabha, they want to date it from the Sekraj period. But really, it's from 1696, around this same type of period we're talking about for the Amrit Charge.
It's very hard to get copies of it.
Yeah, it's around then. I mean, I've got manuscript copies from then, as in I photographed them.
Nice.
I found one from 1701. And other dates. And so the thing is, it has a lot of legitimacy, but people don't like the content because they find it romantic or,
it's an
quote unquote Hindu and so on. But for me, it's a very, very interesting document, very important to understand the Rehit. And, you have to look it's so important because it tells us how the Khalsa Raj is formed politically and how our state would be formed. And that's why it's so important to look at that document and understand it. And I invite scholars to look at it and how we can apply it to our Qawm and how we can do something with it. But the SGPC as ambassadors for our Panth is just not a good idea. Committee, a benign committee that sits there under the Indian government. That's not Khalsa.
One thing that we've alluded to briefly just throughout this whole podcast, and probably one of the last questions that we'll deal with, which is, how does the construction of the city Dasam tie with the creation of the Khalsa? And the reason I ask this is because the evidence Gurwal puts forward is he argues that Jab Sahib and Akal Ustat is composed by Guru Gobind Singh Ji, according to Chaupai Singh's Rehitnamas in 1677, so this is almost 20 years before the Khalsa is created. Guru Ki Sakhiyan states that Krishna Avatar is started and takes 4 years to complete from 1684, obviously, to 1688. And this again seems to tally up with internal evidence of some Dasam Granth manuscripts. And then 1696, Chitra Pakyan is completed per the Chaupai Singh Rehitnamas and also tallies up with the internal evidence of Sri Dasam Granth. Considering how closely those dates are connected to 1698, 99, how does all of that mesh together? Because I think a lot of modern day missionaries, and there's a few famous ones on Twitter who argue until they are blue in the face that Dasam Granth has nothing to do with Sikhi, but then still have taken Amrit, and their Panj Pyare would have read Japsai, which is from the Dasam Granth. So that circle doesn't make sense to me, right? But how does that how does the historical creation of the Dasam Granth scripture connect to the creation of the Khalsa?
Well, we have to go like, look, you've quoted Gariwal Sahib, and he's quoting Chaupai Singh Shibba, and Guru Ki Sakhiyan, and then this whole Chaupai Singh Rehitnamas, where the Bani tells you when it was written, and he put 1677. So the thing is, first of all, let's go back to Guru Gobind Singh, what we know, Patna Sahib. Maharaj was a pure warrior from birth. His first toys were weapons. He wasn't schooled into this. This was his nature. And this was, goes into the mythology of who Guru was as Dushdaman in his previous life before. He was a Kshatriya. He brought Kshatriya Dharam to the Panth. That was his role, his purpose, as we've said. And that was to make a Kshatriya Panth, the Khalsa. And so Shastra Vidya, worship of weapons, and all these things were institutionalized in the Khalsa and the Ved by Guruji, right? And if you look at Jap Sahib, was said to have been composed when Maharaj was training his Boj. And you can hear it in the rhythms of it, in the onomatopoeia, namastavang, like the twang of the bow, and you read the Bani, it's in there, that the drum sounding in that Bani, same in a Kalustat, same in the Pangishan, in a Khanda, and it's a drum roll, right? And so the thing is in the Nagara sounding in the Dasam Granth, the flags are flying, then the Nishan Sahib is flying in the Dasam Granth. And so this is very much of the kind of Ras, the Biras, the warrior spirit of the Bani. And so historically, how does it tally? You've already said it, because the Nithanim Bani of Chaupai Sahib 1696, that's near around the Amrit Sanchar dates we've given. The other Bani are beforehand, including the Amrit Swaya, Saravak Sutswaya, 1677 onwards, Carlos, the Jap Sahib. And then we've got, the Chaupai Sahib, which we just said there. So we've just already covered the three, haven't we, already? Immediately in seconds. And they're part of the Dasam Granth. From basically the beginning composition to the last. And that's where Dasam Granth, like, Ragamala is, you could say, the appendix to Guru Granth Sahib. The Zafarnama and Hekayata are the appendix to the Dasam. And Dasam Granth finishes on that colophon, which is at the Sutlej, the river. At Babur Sahib,
Is that where the rivers really quiet?
Exactly. 13 hours, 13 days, 13 hours, 13 seconds. The Chaupai Sahib was composed by Guru Maharaj, Tera, yours, same as Guru Nanak, And so the thing is, and what do we say to nerve the followers for battle? For this a war that's going to come, right? You see, historically, and yet it's spiritual. It's a mystical knighthood, And he creates his Praetorian guards and the Hansings, His Praetorians even more militant than the rest, to give Josh to the rest of the Sangat. And so the thing is, there's something really big in this that we need to understand. So I hope that made sense. But
no, definitely.
In your question, you had all the answers, really. So that's quite easy.
Two last bits that I just want to cover. I know we've been talking for almost 2.5 hours, and I'm really, really grateful that I managed to kind of get that much of your time. So probably the most controversial bit, because it's, I think, most misunderstood, which is the role of the goddess, so to speak, quote unquote. Now, Chaupai Singh says that the creation of the Khalsa is preceded by the invocation of, in Gariwal's words, not mine, the warlike Devi. What is interesting is Chaupai Singh's story accounting the Devi story is omitted from later copies. So there's a copy of Chaupai Singh's Rehitnama that was housed in the Sikh reference library and was destroyed in 1984. But in that copy, the reference to the Devi is taken out. There is like, it's been expunged. Gaur Singh says that Guru Sahib also invoked the goddess to create a new Panth. Gurwal mentions that the story of the goddess is introduced by several Sikh writers in the 18th century, but is now treated as a myth. One thing that I think has become quite clear through everything that we've been discussing is these pre-colonial texts are actually all pretty accurate and are all actually pretty much in agreement. We have discussed some differences, but they're all pretty much...
All of them have the episode of the Devi.
Yeah.
Right?
So is it just the fact that our modern religious sensibilities has expunged anything in reference to being Hindu, and therefore this goddess stories had to be cut out? Or is there more to it? Like, what is going on? Like, first of all, I guess people would ask, did that happen?
It did happen.
Okay, so what is the...
Historically, we can say it happened 100%.
Okay, so what's the evidence and how does the story go?
Well, the evidence is, number one, that a Brahmin family who were the Purohits, they were the administrators of Guru's court. They arranged this havan and Guruji blessed them with a plate, which is mentioned in Sikh history. It's mentioned in Sardar Malik.
Is this the copper plate?
Yeah, the copper plate. That's still there. The local people know that happened. In the Atiyas, it says Guruji went there. So you got the copper plate. You got this whole episode. You've got the copper plate mentioned in the 18th century.
Yep.
So, and it still exists. And then you've got the whole connection with the Devi and the Dasam Granth, Chandi Divar, Ugra Danti, Pagoti Stodar, the Durga praises to the Mata in Akal Ustat, and then, the Siri Pagoti Ji Sahai, and then the Hemkund Sahib narrative, and this all this connection, Chopa Singh Rehitnamas, Suraj Prakash, the list is endless, right?
Yep.
Which modern day Christian Sikhs don't like, or the Singh Sabha Sikhs don't like, who have a scientific worldview. But for people with a mythological worldview, which I subscribe to that world, cosmology is it's just all a part of our view.
Yeah.
But there's something unique in it. Let's first start with what fits the Hindu narrative, What we can say is the Shakti cult of India,
Yeah.
Because Hindu narrative doesn't... If I say Hindu, what is it? Is it Shiv Puja? Shaivite? Is it Krishna Bhakti, Vaishnava?
Yeah.
And this is to do with the Shakti cult, right?
Yeah.
So this is one particular sampradaya of India.
What order?
Yeah. So it's not like you can't say Hindu either.
Yeah.
And again, they throw them all together.
Yeah.
And you can't, right?
They're all very different.
So let's look at the Shakti cult of India, which worships the feminine forms of the divine. First thing, the Rig Veda doesn't say you have individual gods. It says that you have Par Brahm, Parameshwar, which is in the Purushuktam, like Shopurk in Gurbani, it's talking about the oneness of the divine. It says, out of the oneness of the divine, there are many attributes, and those attributes shine out as gods.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so even Hindus know that Kali Ma is not God.
Yeah.
She's like an angel. She's one manifestation of God. So what first thing is, this connects the Hindu Dharam and the Sikh Dharam.
Yep.
Right? Actually, when Guru Nanak does Aarti at Jagannath Puri, he does it out of what people miss, and I can't believe people miss it. He is doing that Aarti to say to them, why have you made an idol of God?
Yeah.
Because Jagannath Puri, they've made one of Parbrahm Parameshwar, of the Mahavishnu, which in the original Brahmanic tradition, you could make one of a Deva, but not one of God.
Okay.
But there, they've gone to the next level where they've made one of God.
Yeah.
Right? And so he's actually protesting that with the Aarti, his way of protesting. And so the thing is, people miss that. And so the thing is, what is Guruji? First, what relates us to Hindus on a deep level? Hindus don't believe in a god of form. They believe God is formless.
Yes.
And they believe the Devas are manifestations of
particular attributes. Yeah, not the complete manifestation.
Yeah. And most Hindus will say that. And most Hindus believe in Paramatma, Parameshwar. Yeah, the absolute. And just the Sikhs do, And so the Guru wasn't doing any untoward there, but the Guru at the same time was not, this is the fine line, he's going there to pay his respects to that tradition, and he's meditating there and doing tapasya there. But this is the fine line now. Why is he doing that? And this is what gets interesting. Because if you look at the Janam Sakhis, remember, outside Guru Nanak Dev Ji's door, Durga sweeping,
Yeah.
You remember, Guru Angad Dev Ji's a worshipper. Naina of that Devi. Then he follows Guru Nanak
and renounces it, so to speak.
because he sees her worshipping Guru Nanak.
Okay.
This is the same thing.
Okay.
So Guru,
I see you're going. Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
link it together. So Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj is showing the Brahmins, hey, this attribute of God, I myself in my guruhood. You got to look in a tantric way. You know, any guru has to go through tantric processes of Mahavidyas. And Mahavidyas means you have control over the gods and goddesses. Hence the Kara is given. People say, oh, they're linking us with Hindus and want us word. No, the reason why that's written is because the guru had power over those gods.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah? Because he's one with the one.
With the it.
They're still in their form. But he's one with the one. He's gone into the complete absoluteness, right? And so he's showing that power over the goddess of being able to harness her power, number one, that she becomes manifest for him, that she gives her blessing for the Khalsa Panth.
Okay,
I want to finish, otherwise it's fine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he doesn't disconnect her from the oneness itself because he's from a position of non-duality. And so the Guru isn't doing his bhakti there like the Brahmins are doing their bhakti. He's doing it for a different aim to show them that he has got the power over the goddess.
Yeah. So it's not actually in a modern sense of the goddess is blessing Guruji. It's actually Guruji is making this Shakti, this power, manifest for his...
Because they said he wasn't able to do it.
Yes.
He was challenged.
So it's not actually seeking approval to create the Khalsa. It's actually almost manifesting the energy required that is then put... Because it's like then Chandi Divan and then...
And so it's a very fine line. Do you understand what I'm saying?
But it's a fine line because of the way... it's the same facts, but it's just the way you're viewing it. Is the subtlety is...
subtle. And so this is after 10 years of looking at Sini Dasam, the Chandi episode.
And isn't there a Gurdwara built at the place where Maharaj made the Devi Padkar?
No, that's still a mandir.
Oh, okay.
It's still a mandir, but they'll tell you that happened there. I've been there many times.
Yeah.
Ask them. And this is the interesting point is like, the whole thing with, like Ram Kavach,
Yep.
which is quoted by Gaur Singh to be set up there. And then, the whole part of the Havan and all these things which people consider controversial. We know Baba Deep Singh did a Havan.
Yeah.
We know Baba Garbakh Singh did one before and Shahab Ali in the Sekatiyas. And it's all to invoke the Ard Shakti Siri Bhagavati Ji Sahai.
Yeah.
Which you can say, but then we got to go back to Chandi. That people say, Chandi Divan, Tehin Durga Sajake. So the Ard Shakti made the Ard Shakti. So the Ard Shakti made the Ard Shakti.
The big energy made the little energy. Yeah. Is the big energy. Yeah. But that's the paradox of oneness though, isn't it? And the problem is we're in duality, so trying to understand that is the issue.
That's why Guruji forbid idol worship. Because you see, the problem with idol worship, what happens is you put the personification of God into that thing. And what the Guru was saying is, no, it's much bigger than that. Don't look at it on a limited level. That's why Sikhs don't have idol worship. We worship Shabad. But what we've done is thrown the baby out of the bathwater with this idea. And we've gone like whitewashed all the colour out of the universe with it. That's not the idea.
No.
So it's a very fine line.
Okay.
And so I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. Last question, and this is also because I can notice my camera's going to die. The battery's running low. But last question is, I wasn't actually planning to ask you about this, but it got my interest because Chopa Singh says there are two Granths prepared by Guru Gobind Singh Ji. One was called the Samundar Sagar Granth and the other was called the Avtar Leela Granth. Kesar Singh Chibbar adds that the Samundar Sagar Granth was thrown into the river by the order of Guru Gobind Singh Ji in 1701 and claims to have seen 91 lines of this Granth. Avtar Leela Granth is said to have been an unbound folio, just like the Samundar Sagar Granth. So for those people who are listening, unbound folio just means loose pages essentially, so it's not been bound into a physical book. And again, Avtar Leela Granth was said to have been scattered during various battles. Jibbar claims to have seen 7 folios of the Avtar Leela Granth in the possession of a Sikh in Lahore. All I want to know is, what has your historical research shown about first of all, the existence of these two Granths, considering references are very little? And then secondly, what role did they play? And then also, what is interesting is the modern narrative argues that these Granths were lost when the Sikhs were crossing the river around the Battle of Chamkor and the siege of Anandpur Sahib. Kesar Singh Chibbar says that Guru Gobind Singh Ji, under his own command, tells the Sangat to throw them in the river. What is going on?
Before I go to that, I want to go back to the Devi.
Sure.
And so Chaupa Singh says to the Guru, I read the Khalsa every day, but what's mentioned by the questions and answers in there? And then the Guru replied, from my heart and soul, I swore to invoke you to help me complete the Granth. And that's a part of Maharaj's Bani, right? And then Maharaj advised Chaupa Singh to read up to the end of Avtar Leela Pachitra Natak and get the answer. And then from that narration, the questions and answers are about the Guru's love of Dharam.
Yeah.
And that's what the Bani itself has been compiled. Because you see people look at those questions again in a Niramalal, romantic, philosophical way. But that's the whole point of Maharaj writing those questions. Because remember, what's the invocation of Khalsa Panth? I invoke the sabal, the iron, the steel, the sword. And that's what the questions are to do with about what is war, what is righteous. It's all related to that. And so Maharaj says, look at the Pachitra Natak, which is about Dharam there. After that, then the incident of Devi comes.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm just going to read you what I've put here just to make it short. A short period later, a very controversial event took place that is recorded in all early hagiographies, which is the incident of the Devi. The Singh Sabha has seen it as something very controversial and a misrepresentation that's been added in. I'm just reading this in day language. I've written it much more complicated. It was later edited out on the Panth Prakash by Veer Singh, which I already talked about.
Discussed in the last podcast.
And including the works of Bhai Mani Singh in other books, yeah. A very detailed account is in the School of Prakash of Santokh Singh. It's in the Chaupa Singh's Rehitnamas, which you already said.
Yep.
It's also in the Das Gur Katha of Kankan.
Yep.
And, in that, I think it's in the Encyclopedia of Sikhism, it says, certain factual errors such as ascription to Guru Gobind Singh worship of the goddess Durga have also crept into the work. Yeah. Okay. So the earliest account by Kankan narrates that the Guru was called by Pandit to perform a sacred fire in order to make the Devi materialize. At the summit of Naina Devi mountain next to the Anandpur Sahib, the Guru is said to have sit with the Pandit and create compositions of the praise of the Devi as the offerings were given to the Havan. The Pandits are unable to make the divine feminine manifest, but the Guru succeeds by throwing all the offerings on. The Devi manifests as a blinding light. The feminine divine tells the Guru that she'll give him whatever he requests, but sacrifices are required. The Guru then says, know that the Shakti, the power of God, the Devi as the divine sword, and asks for 5 heads. It's, you can see the connection here of the Obrah Sunjab, yeah? In the other early accounts of references, the Apocrypha in relation to the incident, course in 1751, author writes that as the Devi became manifest, the verses shuttle the Devi were perfected, that he employs a term used in the Ugrad Lakti in his own narration, praise the divine feminine. Even more explicit is the use of the ending of the Ugrad Lakti, and these verses are very pure perfected. The author then writes that the songs of the Charan of the Devi were made. Furthermore, there's an explicit relationship of the verses expressing the greatness of the Devi, the divine feminine, and some sections of the Khalsa.
Yeah.
In the Baisakhi Nama of 1769, before Kesar Singh introduces the subject, he asks Sikhs not to get angry.
So it's actually been controversial for a very long time.
Yeah. He then quotes heavily from the beginning of the Ugadati in the penultimate last quotation of Ugadati. He quotes the verse Khalsa as the third way. He states that the Panth was started by a favor from the Devi. So a favor doesn't mean like a blessing. It means like someone say,
you owe me one.
Yeah, like she owes the Guru one.
Yeah.
And from the whole typical Sahib narrative, yeah? Shipper writes that this favor was the Bani and that the Divine Mother, Devi Mata, gave gift in the favor of the Panth. Bani Varavaj. The boon was to destroy the Turks invading Mughals, and he gives Bhatta Bahadur as an example how the Shakti destroyed the Turks through him. He connects the defeats of the Turk with the line Kabir Bajbet Chopi Sakambalish Karnakata. He then quotes the Charitra of Pichana aforementioned that Singh should not dream of any other woman other than his own wife.
Which is what we were discussing earlier.
Yeah. Sarup Das Padla writes in 1776, Mema Prakash,
provides a narration with a theme related to the warrior culture. He states that Chandi is synonymous with the double-edged sword, Khanda ka bod.
Yeah.
That's similarly stated in the previous text. And, in Buddhist iconography, you see that a lot of the goddesses, they have the double-edged sword.
Yeah.
And in Hindu iconography.
Yeah, it's massive within the culture.
Yeah. In his version of it, a miracle only takes place in front of the Guru and a kirpan is left. Therefore, the emphasis is the aim of the ball, which is to initiate Kshatriya actions. And they say that Khanda and Anandpur Sahib came from the Devi.
And that's the one that they claim is the one that was used in
His first art.
Yeah.
In verse 4, he explicitly states that the Khanda is equal to the Devi. Right? These are not my words, Sangat, so don't throw stones at me. I'm just telling you what the old
research says, yeah.
authors have said. The Bible of the Navani is said to be narrative of the Varan by Vedas, expounded by Mani Singh, has references to the Apocrypha composition, the book of distorted in connection to the incident of Devi. I'm reading this really fast, yeah? This book contains many references to Dasam. Granth states that the Bani is both born and devotional. Within this work is dialogue with Sikh and the Sangha to ask by Mani Singh the meaning behind Gian. By Mani Singh replies, the meaning behind Chitra Prakyan Dasam Granth is Yudha Mehbani, Gian Mehbani, Amrit Mehbani, Charitra Mehbani. That the Dasam Granth Sahib is an utterance for war, for knowledge and spirituality and strategies for the secular world. This would resonate with the military mystical initiation of the double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. After the incident of the Devi, Kakdan relates the Guru inspired the Bani of Akal to be repeated. This is a term not used in the narrative for any other of the Gurus. It's probably in reference to the 10th Guru's own compositions where Akal is repeated within them. Additionally, Kakdan narrates Khalsa as distinct from the Hindus and Muslims like the Ugradat after Khalsa. Earlier, we talked about copper plates. There's also one there. We talked about Siddhartha Granth and, and the Hukamnama that was given to that family. And then the Khalsa, Amrit and Charan goes on forth.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get to the Vidyasagar or Samun Sagar Granth.
Yeah, of Prague.
And so we know from the history that as the Guru was leaving, Anandpur Sahib was sacked.
Yep.
And Shibad writes, a large scripture was made. He counted the pages, which you've already quoted, yeah? And basically, this is the interesting part, yeah? In 1758, he's saying in 1701, some of it was pointing to a stream, yeah?
Yeah.
And some of its pages, he said, survived. And he goes, the Guru dictated another scripture in the other portions with the play of the stars was completed with other compositions that were not bound. Yeah?
Oh, and that's the Tavlin that we were talking.
Yeah. So Shibad also states that, and that's also Dropar Singh, they're literate Sikhs, yeah? And basically, this still exists. So the Vidyasagar, which had Guru Gobind Singh's handwriting in it and corrections, that was the translations of various material, Vedic, Puranic, Sufi literature. It was all written into Gurmukhi, and a massive Granth was made, a huge Granth. The Maharaja Patiala Moti Bagh Palace still has that.
So it wasn't destroyed?
It wasn't destroyed. It was put into the stream, but it was collected after.
Okay.
And there were actually 2 copies, yeah? There were 2 copies. I don't know what's happened to one copy, but there's one copy of it exists.
Okay.
And they say that in 1984, there was one copy of it at the Darbar.
And then it gets destroyed.
By St. Dorkson Library. But the Maharaja Patiala, he still has that other copy, thankfully, yeah?
Mm.
And that's the Vidyasagar Granthable Vidya. And Kavi Santokh Singh said he was put into the stream by Guruji and was taken by hill princes. And then one report says one Granth of the Raja of Sirwar has, while the Raja of Mandi has another, which, see, that's true, yeah?
Interesting.
And some of the poetries of Kavis were compiled together by Maharaj and Narinder Singh, Bhai Singh, Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji, the Vidya Darbar. So there's books of these compositions, yeah, which I think Patnam Saab presented. Now you talk about Atar Leela in being quoted, and then you see Kesha Singh Shipper also said, and there was another one not bound. That's Sarblo Granth, because remember the play of the avatars, yeah. And so the play of the Sarblo avatar and the other avatars. For me, that's Sarblo, and that fits into the sambat that is given as well.
loosely of Sarbal Granth. The Sambat of Sarbal Granth is around 1698 at the beginning, which means it was commenced around that, probably around that time.
Same time. Yeah.
Or the other way looking at it is possibly completed,
Yeah.
So you've got like a timeline of 10 years, and then also it has the Khalsa Shabad there. Khalsa Wurdu Bekas around the Khalsa Amrit here.
And that's from Sarbal.
So it makes sense of that again, this date 1698, the sacking, the Avtar Leela, the mention of it. So actually, who says it's called Sarbal Granth? Inside it's called Mangala Charan Granth. It's got loads of names for itself there.
I see what you're saying. So it's actually referred.
And it's about Sarbal Avtar. And so Avtar Leela could be that. And it can't be Jobi Avtar.
Because that's in Dasam Granth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's my answer to that. Hope that will work.
You see? No, I appreciate that. That has been almost 3 hours of questions and answers. So thank you, obviously, for taking the time to do that. I desperately want to get a copy of your thesis now because of how big it is, and equally how much information is probably in there. But that's a separate conversation. I just want to say thank you.
It's pretty a lot of work with Guru Gobind Singh's grace. One day I will publish it.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
I'll put it online for free. And so, no worries.
Yeah, so no, just thank you for your time. I hope people listening to this appreciated it, but thank you. Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So you've made it to the end of another podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did putting it together. Just a quick shout out to our patrons: Neil B, Hernan Pisano, Jazz Dillon, Gurpreet Singh, Gurdi Bath, Himmat Singh Khalsa, Anish Man, Ramneek Kaur, Mani Singh, Rav Singh, Ramneek Kaur, Amardeep Basi, Yasmin Jaswal, Gagan Singh, and then also a big shout out to our YouTube members: Jazz S, N Singh, Gavin Shergill, RB, Gary Parmar, GS, Gurpreet Danjal, Radhajeet Kaur, Hunter Hill, and Amanveed Mandir. If you want to support us, then you can check out the links in the description below. Equally, if you want to gain early access to all future podcasts, then do consider becoming a level 2 YouTube member or higher. Again, you can find all the links just below this video. Otherwise than that, before I say bye, make sure you hang on and check out this sneak preview of next month's podcast.
And there are multiple sources who independently say of each other that there was bribery, there was blackmail, there was sexual blackmail, there was all kinds of politicking, pulling in of favors.
Yoga in general is a bricolage, right?
There's telemarketing scams, many of them. There's smuggling, there's fraudulent art sales, there's gemstone scams. There's the drug dealing, the drug smuggling. You put all that together, it's disproportionate. If you had a high school where you had 20, 30, 40 people involved in felony level criminal activity, that would say something.